Hi, Brandon. It's great to see you back.
Hey, Brennan, I'm glad to be back. It's been a little bit, but always good to be here.
We missed you. Like some of the artists we've had recently were like, "Where's Brandon?" So I said we all agreed to have like a cardboard cutout of you, and then we just put it next to me when you're not here. So at least you're always here in spirit.
True, true. It's the next best thing.
I mean, I have one of me. I could give you one of me, and you can send me one of you, and that works out.
Fair, never know.
Well, thank you everyone again for tuning in to Christian Music Bros podcast. Once again, I'm Brendan, and this is Brandon,
Welcome to the podcast, everyone.
and thank you for tuning in. Today we are with Stephen Gray, the director of After Death, which is a movie by Angel Studio. So we'll let Stephen introduce himself first before we dive in.
Hey everyone, Stephen Gray here. So I'm a director up in Canada, and like they mentioned, we came out with After Death, which is actually my first feature-length film that went out to 2,700 theaters back in October in 2023.
And if you don't know much about Angel Studios too, who helped promote the movie, or I don't know, the publisher, studio, whatever you want to call it. I don't know movie terms as much as I know music terms, so I do apologize with that.
Yeah,
This
it's all
is
good. Yeah,
but they're also the ones that did Sound of Freedom. They have the movies like Sound of Freedom. They also have Sight that's coming out. So the Angel Studio is just a big Christian based film studio.
yeah, they were our distribution company for the film. We came to them when we so just really quickly. After Death is a feature-length film that asks the question, what happens after we die? And so we actually interviewed 14 different people in the film who died anywhere between seconds to an hour and 45 minutes, which is a very long time, and medically speaking is, kind of becomes, miraculous at the point where they're even coming back at that point. And then we also interview, neurosurgeons, neuroscientists, and cardiologists, and we're kind of investigating what's physiologically happening to the dying process. And then, these miraculous accounts, including John Piper from books like 90 Minutes in Heaven, John Burke, who wrote Imagine Heaven, Mary Neal, who wrote To Heaven and Back. And there's these really familiar, books that have kind of been in the Christian, circles for a
Mhm.
while, but never all together in a feature length documentary. So we kind of we wanted to investigate, what happens after we die, and make it appealing to both Christians as well as non-Christians, people who maybe haven't thought about any kind of spiritual reality before, and hopefully this kind of like, points them towards God.
Cool. And I really like that. And it's like really cleverly shot. So if you haven't watched the movie, we're just gonna start right now. You watch a documentary movie, same thing. They're the same thing. It's a documentary movie of what, but it's really well shot, really impressive. Brandon, do you have anything you want to add off that very quick before you dive in more?
Yeah, like we saw so much of the movie already from the clips, from the trailers. You can see it's not just, a cheesy Christian documentary film. This actually is something that, Stephen, you put your time, you put your passion into this. It's well shot, directed to the point that it's a great movie, especially for people who are just curious on questions. You don't need to come from church or all that, just curious about what happens after death. It's just so well put together, well done from the interviews, from the reactments, from the actors who do the scenes. It's all just so well done like that.
Awesome,
And
appreciate that. Yeah, we made the film for the theatrical experience. Of course, now you can watch it at home. It's available, I think, on Blu-ray and DVD, and it's available to rent and purchase on a few different places online. But yeah, we made it for the theatrical experience. Typically, documentaries don't go theatrically as well, so it was really unusual that we went out to, like I said, it's 2,700 theaters in a wide release. But we kind of tackled this story as like half narrative and half documentary. Of course, we have all the real people telling in their own words the things that
Mhm.
they saw and experienced, as well as the corroborated kind of elements here on Earth. But then we go there visually and sonically and try and just get us to imagine, what is heaven, what does that look like, and what, the future to come, essentially.
I
and
love
for
that. You get a sense from that. Yeah.
Yes. And for those who are watching this interview or listening to it, we'll drop the trailer into the description of this video. I would play it on this call, but we would get copyrighted so hard by YouTube, they would take our video down. So just because YouTube's like that. You were talking about we have like 14 different people like to tell about their stories and everything. Can you tell us a little bit how you found those people? Because I was just curious, like how you came to find these people.
Yeah, I mean, so why I even kind of went out to tell this film in the beginning was, so it was kind of born out of loss. So I've been a filmmaker for about 15, 16 years now. Most of my work has been in the commercial space up here in Canada. So and so basically in 2012, my brother-in-law was killed in a car wreck, and he was 36 years old, here one moment, gone the next. And for me, I mean, I grew up going to church all my life, raised in a Christian home, going to Christian church. And in terms of Christianity, my upbringing, I went to a Pentecostal church and then later to a Baptist church. So I've kind of seen the whole gamut of the different kind of denomination experience in Christianity. So I guess I realized in 2012 how shallow my faith was, because it's something I'm kind of really challenged with. Where is my brother-in-law? Are these stories that I was raised to believe? Is the Bible true? Is heaven real? All of that. So I was really kind of questioning that. And so as I was questioning that, that's when I came across these stories of people who had these near-death experiences where they clinically died for a period of time, had some kind of profound experience, usually, seeing heaven, maybe meeting dead relatives, seeing angels, often meeting Jesus, and then told it's not their time and they need to come back. I had never heard of this stuff before. It's been around since I think around the 60s and 70s. It started to become a thing with the invention of CPR. More and more people were kind of being brought back from the brink of death. And so more of this is happening, but I wasn't aware of it at all. I just wasn't looking into this kind of stuff. So after I think it was like 30 bucks or something like that between my wife and I, there was something so interesting about all of these different people having very different life experiences. Totally, one is a Baptist minister, one is a spine surgeon, one is a university professor who is an atheist, all very different backgrounds. And yet they died at different points in their lives. And they had this, profound experience that convinced them that heaven is real, hell is real, God's real, and that Jesus is the Son of God, and he's the one he's the rescuer, essentially. So and I'm just like, how is it that all these people are kind of like pointing to the same thing, and yet they don't seem to know each other? I thought there's something so interesting about that. So it wasn't until John Burke's book, Imagine Heaven, where that John did such a good job in that book. For everyone listening, if you're going to watch the movie After Death, like a follow-up book to read would be Imagine Heaven. It's such like After Death is just going to intro you to near-death experiences and this whole kind of crazy thing that just kind of points towards God. But Imagine Heaven does a way better job of a deeper dive into this topic, and it parallels with all that there is in the Bible connected to near-death experiences. So John did this great job of like investigating. He was 100 different accounts after researching 1,000 different near-death experiences. He focuses narrowly on 100 and kind of like connects the dots. How are these all connected? What are they all pointing to? And how is this related to scripture, if at all? And so, and yeah, John did such an amazing job. I just reached out to him and I was just like, this film is put on my heart. I really want to tell it. The main reason I want to tell it is because I'm not seeing what I actually want to watch for myself that would have helped me in this kind of grieving process, asking these questions. And my faith in crisis, this would have helped me. And so I wanted to put that together. John was really gracious to offer his time, and he started connecting me with a few different people. The first story I told was Dale Black. His story is captured in this book, Flight to Heaven. Dale Black is this pilot who died in a plane crash in 1969 in Burbank, California. And it made the headlines of the LA Times the next day. It was quite a kind of spectacle in terms of how he died. Two other pilots had perished as well, and then he ended up having some vitals, and they brought him back. And he had this whole journey into heaven, and then was told it wasn't his time, and he came back. I told his story as a single story in a short film called Discovering Heaven, and it was kind of working out like how could this work, visually and in terms of a documentary format. Again, coming from the commercial space, this is very foreign for me. It's all new. And then after making that, I connected with Cypher Studios, who put out this amazing film back in 2017 called The Heart of Man. The Heart of Man is it's a documentary, but it's also this hybrid that's like half narrative and half documentary that explores a really difficult topic, kind of like sexual sin and kind of the redemption process. And I thought, okay, that's a really complicated topic. It's one that probably not everyone really wants to go and watch, and yet it was very successful. They released it theatrically, and I just thought these guys are the perfect guys to connect with on trying to make this near-death experience doc. So then, the rest is history. Essentially, we went into production on the feature after connecting with multiple different stories, and we interviewed, I think it was like 20 or 30 different people. What we chose to kind of have in the final film was we had this selection process, and most of it was kind of like through the lens of skepticism. So not assuming that everyone's telling the truth, not assuming that near-death experiences are real, all this kind of stuff. We had this sort of checklist. One was, is there validating evidence around how they died? Can we very confidently prove that they did die? So, whether there's medical transcripts or first responder eyewitnesses, or their doctor actually going on record and saying, what actually had happened, all this kind of stuff. Is there that documentation? And then the other thing is, what was really compelling to us as filmmakers was there was a few of these stories where people actually had a lot to lose in coming forward and sharing their story. So Howard Storm, who we focus a lot of time on in the film, he's this university professor. He's an atheist. I think he's decades into this kind of ardent atheist philosophy. He doesn't believe that there's anything after he dies, right? And he has this whole stomach perforation in Paris, France. There's not a lot they can do for him, and then he actually slips into becoming unconscious and then dies. He's shocked to learn that hell, heaven, God, all of that's real. And at first it's very alarming. Then he actually gets he gets this memory served to him when he's a small child, and he's 5 or 6 years old. He sees himself in a moment when he was this young, being brought once or twice to his Sunday school, and he's being taught this really simple song, "Jesus loves me, this I know." And then the next thing he recalls is this voice is telling him to pray, and he doesn't know what prayer is. He hasn't practiced this, but it says it again, pray, and he just kind of hesitant, doesn't know what to say, doesn't know what to do. Third time again, very strongly, just like, Howard, pray. Then he calls out to Jesus, and he's rescued out of this hellish void in this liminal space between this life and the next. And Jesus rescues him, pulls him up towards heaven. He doesn't enter heaven, but then he's shown his whole life review. He's shown like from the moment he's born to the moment that he died. And then he's also shown the context of some of the lives of the people around him, including his father, who was abusive to him when he was a kid. He's shown his dad's whole life, including when his dad was born, and things that he saw in his dad's life that he never knew before. They gave context for how this guy became so terrible, essentially, and how God was there in all of these really terrible moments. He was always there. He was always waiting for Howard and his family to just come to God. And then he's told it's not his time, needs to go back. When he comes back, I mean, he didn't believe in anything after, and now he knows 100% there's something after, not just a feeling. And it wasn't, he would describe it as, it wasn't like a dream state or like he had a vision. He would say that when he stepped into this eternity, into this internal realm, he said that is more real than this life here. This life feels like a dream state. That is my reality. That's like he said, it's like you're more conscious in that world, in that spiritual realm. So for him, that's his ultimate reality. He knows without a shadow of a doubt that's real. He comes back, his whole life is transformed, right? He doesn't know how to live in this world anymore of filled with atheist friends. So ends up after some time, he ends up taking a 90% pay cut, leaving the university job, and becoming a volunteer minister throughout the rest of his life. This happened in the 1980s. Still to this day, he works in a church. And why would you give up everything and transform your life around that much if it weren't real, you know? So that was just something so compelling to us. And it wasn't just Howard's stories, multiple other stories where they're all kind of doing the same thing. So much of their life had changed. They had so much to lose in telling their story. And there was something so interesting about that.
Thank you for sharing. Some of those stories are really powerful and really interesting. And like the book you recommend, I promise I'm not related to John Burke. Okay, that was my joke for today. I'm sorry, I had to stop. But Brandon, do you have anything you want to add off very quick?
Yeah, that's amazing. Again, so many of the stories on there that I've seen them all throughout my life, especially 90 Minutes in Heaven. I grew up seeing so many of those interviews as well. Just hearing these stories, especially when you see the evidence about how there's no way they could make that up or they would believe that or change their life based it. It's real what happened and that God actually brought them back to it through this incredible experience and these testimonies. It's amazing. I would love to hear real quick about like what's the impact been that you've seen from firsthand from this movie going out. Like you said, all the theaters it reached, it made a
Mhm.
couple million at box office and still reaching so many others. What impact have you seen from that?
You stole my question, so
Yeah, I mean, as filmmakers, it's very exciting, to have. It's hard to make a film, but it's a whole other thing for the film to get released. Lots of movies get made every year. Not every film goes to theaters, and like I said in the kind of the beginning, it's very rare for a documentary to go to theater at all, even if it was like 100 theaters.
Mhm.
And this went out in a wide release, which is very unusual. So I think it was like the fourth biggest opening for any documentary in history. It's the highest grossing documentary, all categories, not just faith, since 2019, and it's the highest grossing all time in history for any kind of faith doc. So, and that's not because, oh yeah, it's about us filmmakers. It's about the stories, right? This question, what happens after you die, it affects everyone. So a lot of films, usually they want to find a niche audience. It's like, this is the audience, that's the story, going to connect with this audience. But this is unusual in that, this really affects anyone that's old enough to understand
Mhm.
and grapple with death. They're probably going to be interested in the topic. So a lot of people came out and watched in the theaters, and we heard from so many people, really, really profound, impacting stories. Some people came to Christ. Some people were moved from an atheist worldview to becoming towards theism, like where they're very open now after just watching the film. Now, we
Mhm.
haven't been able to, like, follow everyone since that time, the release in October 2023. But we've heard immediate reactions from people where they say they moved so much from not believing in anything. There's the material world. When we die, we're nothing. We just cease to exist, all the way to believing that no, there is something after, like, confidently.
Mhm.
That's a pretty big change, right? For a film to, like, change your whole worldview. And our hope is that that kind of puts that person on the path to coming to Christ, right? And it's really the church and the Christians, hopefully, that are kind of continuing the conversations with people that maybe are asking those questions that lead them towards God. But I'm confident that God's going to work out, putting those people in place, right? That's only something God can do. And yeah, it's profound. That was the best hope for making the film. Like, it changed
Mhm.
my life. It brought me back towards God. And that was my hope, ultimately, that this brings people back towards God that were struggling, and for people that aren't struggling, that it just deepens their faith. My hope was that it causes to reflect on this life here, the shortness of this life here, and kind of the time that we have and what we could do with our time. Thinking about that a little more intentionally, thinking kind of kingdom minded a little bit more, and then just opening up the Bible and reading it in an all new way. Thinking about, if
Mhm.
this spiritual realm is totally real, heaven is real, this is God's kingdom. What does that mean for my life here, and what does that look like for my life here?
For sure.
And It's pretty good. And in the background, you have the really good music by Hannah Perry. Can you tell us a little bit about the music? Like, what made you guys choose that type of music, or Hannah the like compose, not the music
Yeah,
and score and everything?
yeah, Hannah just did an amazing job with the score. So we were early on, I think. So music is a huge thing for me. It's a very huge thing for the producers from Cypher Studios. Honestly, it's the same level as like the aesthetics for us. It was like we're only going to get there sonically in terms of bringing us towards like heaven, and hopefully we do something with visuals. But music is really the thing that's going to like go straight to the heart, right? Like kind of bypasses the brain and just goes straight to the heart. And Hannah brought us there. Her music got our attention before we reached out to her, and then when we did, it was like this. It was just this God thing. She was hoping for a project. She does massive feature films exclusively. I don't know that she had even really at that point even done a documentary. This is kind of like this this small thing for her. And it was just this perfect timing. She was looking for a doc or a film where she can explore these existential questions. And she comes from a faith as well. So she was able to finally explore that, sonically. And yeah, she just does an amazing job. If you want to listen to the soundtrack, you can just look on Apple Music or Spotify. Just search After Death. And the original album is up there to listen to. We also have an Inspired By album with some amazing artists. So if you just search After Death Inspired By, we'll search for it now.
Yeah, I have it right here. I pulled it up on my side.
Yeah, we were so fortunate to work with so Joshua Silverberg had connected us with these amazing artists. He's out of Nashville, amazing guy. So Chris Kilala wrote In Heaven, which we actually had in the film. And it was played during the credits, and then Tasha Layton, Brian and Katie Torwalt, Elle Linebear, Marianne J. George, Brad and Rebecca.
Brad and Rebecca brought that up kind of when I met with them like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, their track Kick Death is amazing. So we have a different rendition on that Inspired By album if anyone wants to listen to it. It's on my regular rotation, and not just because it has nothing to do with having made the film. It's just like, oh, I love these songs. These are just, yeah, they're great.
It's very cool. And for those who haven't listened to either of the soundtracks, if you want more of a mellow, like, I don't know, instrumental music, I guess, listen to the original scope soundtrack, then you should listen to the Inspired By soundtrack. I think Brad and I were talking a little bit about that a couple of weeks ago. Weren't we talking about that a couple of weeks ago, even before like we got connected with you?
That we were, yeah, just the soundtrack. We were seeing it everywhere, listening to the songs. We're like, this is really cool. There's something here that we want to invest in even more. So it's awesome how that all came together.
And we just have a few extra minutes with you. Do you have any projects that you're working on outside of After Death? Like, is there something like you're planning a follow up, or do you have anything you're working on that people can look forward to seeing?
Yeah, so we're hoping to do a follow up to After Death. We want to create a documentary series that follows more closely John Burke's work in Imagine Heaven in his follow up book, Imagine the God of Heaven. So After Death, again, it kind of like kicks open the door to like, if you didn't really believe in near death experiences and that maybe if heaven is real or not, this cracks that door open. And we do explore stories from non-Western cultures in the film, but the primary focus was U.S. stories. It was accessible to us, but we want to sort of investigate what happens in other cultures in other countries all around the world. If there's 4,000 recorded accounts near death experiences that have been studied in Dr. Jeffrey Long's book, Evidence for the Afterlife, which we include in the film as well. And these are coming from countries all around the world in different languages. John did an amazing job of actually following up with a bunch of these different cases, investigated, what happens in China, what happens in India, what happens in Israel, what happens in, Syria. And it turns out in all these different places, it's the same thing. It's because, because really, if we're asking that question, if heaven is real, if God's real, then obviously he's the God of the whole universe, right? Like he's the king of the world. And so people are going to they should have overlapping experiences. They should be seeing the same thing. And sure enough, they are. which sometimes is juxtaposed to their upbringing. It's very different than what they were raised to believe. And so we want to investigate that. What does that look like in a series called Imagine Heaven? So that's one. It's a documentary series that we're currently in development on, and then another feature doc is called Doom Scroll that I'm starting with Cypher Studios. The same team behind After Death would be making that, and that's going to be looking at the tidal wave impact of screen addiction, and especially looking at like Gen Zers. I mean, so I'm a dad. I have two kids, two boys, a 12-year-old and a 6-year-old. And so for me as a dad, sure enough, phones are going to become an issue. It's an issue for me as an adult, to be honest with you. So I'm sure this is facing everyone. And as I've, talked to more and more people, it is something that's like facing everyone, right? I work in the media world, so I kind of have to be on these platforms. And so they're not going away. Technology is not going away. So can we have a healthy relationship with tech, and what is it doing to our brains, and how can we circumvent any of the issues with that? So those are two projects that I'm currently working on.
And for those that are watching this, listening, scrolling through us, just go through highlights, whatever you want to call it, because people, the algorithms are weird. But anyway, make sure to follow Steven's projects that are coming out. Make sure to check out After Death. Braden, do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, well, thank you again, Stephen, for joining us on the podcast. Thank you for making this project, putting so much into it, and just again, I was reading the testimonies, reviews of it, and just so many people it's touched. It's amazing how God's used it, not just through your own life, but through the life of all these stories. Like, this is already a story that's already there. God just used you to help put it together, in accessible, really well done way to engage people. So it's so awesome to hear all about that, man.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
And thanks again for joining us. I know Braden just said thank you, but I'm saying thank you personally. And we'll make sure everyone that hasn't watched this, we'll drop the trailer in the section, like the description section of this video. We'll also send a link to maybe like a digital platform, maybe like Amazon or something, if you want to check out the movie. Is there
so it's available.
What link would you recommend, like, for us to drop for people that want to check out the movie? Amazon, what would you or the website?
The easiest link is afterdeathmovie.com. On that page, there's kind of a list of everything, including where you can order the DVD, Blu-ray. It's available on Amazon Prime for rent and purchase right now. It's available on Apple TV, Google Play. There's a few other platforms in the US. And we're hoping to roll out more internationally. It's still playing in theaters internationally right now. Currently, it's still in Australia, New Zealand. So we're kind of still slowly rolling out in other international markets. And yeah.
It's very cool. And thank you to everyone that tuned in on the Christian Music World Podcast. And we'll see you next time. And make sure to check out After Death. Take care, everyone.